And we're here, people.
Yo,
we're back.
People.
It's another episode of the Talkin TV podcast. I'm Dom. That's Chris. I'm just getting right into it. And Chris, I finally get to where... Actually, wait, no, this is the first one of my new shirts that I got for like the last couple batch of shirts that I got, a bunch of theme shirts on an official podcast episode of ours. It is a Fast and Furious shirt, your absolute favorite action franchise, because it pertains to the streets. The Fast and Furious started out low, they started humble, they started on the streets, which is where the movie that we're talking about today takes place. It's cool. It's been a while since I've gotten like a street subgenre movie. They don't make a lot of those anymore.
Yeah, well, what would even be another one?
Training Day.
Okay.
Street Kings, literally any movie made by David Ayer that's not Fury ever. Even Suicide Squad, it qualifies for that.
Yeah, it does.
No, there's a couple other ones. There's a couple other ones. Boys in the Hood qualifies as one. Yeah, we used to get a lot of movies in that subgenre, but we don't get as many anymore. But it's always nice.
Very late '90s, early 2000s.
Yeah, definitely of its time. But what I'm saying is that when we do get a good one, it definitely does stand out. Not necessarily saying that this movie is the case.
No, it's definitely not the case. But yeah, I know what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
Training Day stood out. I know what you're trying to say.
You are picking up what I'm putting down. Look, I can tell that.
So Dom, real quick, I know you kind of splurged on some shirts lately. So
yeah,
what was
I did.
Like the rationale behind that?
The rationale was I wanted to get more shirts because I need more themed shirts. I tried H&M.
Keep wearing the same clothes on YouTube?
I can't because
I'm in the same boat, man.
Also because I have the same wardrobe. I don't have like a very variant wardrobe, I've started to get repetitive, and I'm like, okay, I need more.
You're trying to up your swag a bit.
Yeah, but also because I didn't have that many themed shirts. Like, you got me the Ahsoka shirt for my birthday. It's my birthday, by the way, people. Well, not when this podcast goes up, but on the day that we're recording.
Right now, it is. Happy birthday, Dom.
Thank you, dude.
And everyone, wish him a happy birthday in the comments.
23.
It's not going to be your fault for being a few days late.
This is true. Oh man, dude, do you remember?
No one's going to fault you for it.
Do you remember this day a year ago? Do you remember where we were?
I do. We were down in Yonkers.
That was a fun party.
It was a good time.
That was a fun party. The New Year's party.
That was a fun party.
The New Year's
when
party,
people could congregate more than 3 people in a room.
Exactly. Yeah. The New Year's party, that was a little bit of a different story. But that birthday party last year, that was
no specific details because I'm always gracious to the people who host me, and there's no need to divulge any details because both events were fun in their own way. But real quick, because I know we've been kind of loosely documenting the effects of the quarantine on us normal people throughout this podcast, very loosely at the start of the shows, really. So you went out to the mall.
Yeah.
What was that like? Because I'm only buying stuff online right now.
For the most part, like, aside from the masks and the lines, obviously, that we kind of all gotten used to as far as, like, spacing things out, it wasn't that bad. I tried H&M first. They had I picked this up and a few other things, but they didn't really have that many theme shirts, which I was actually kind of shocked at because they had way more at Christmas. But then I went to Target, which is actually where I got your Christmas present last year, and oh, man, Target doubled down on the themed shirts and realized what a gold mine they have, because I picked up, count it off for me, people. I picked up a Marvel shirt. I picked up a Game of Thrones I Drink and I Know Things shirt. I picked up a Blockbuster shirt, a Jurassic Park shirt, a Star Wars shirt, and a Lion King shirt. It was plus this.
Solid eclectic bunch right there.
It's a pretty great batch. It is a pretty great batch. I'm assuming
the H&M shirt was like the price of 2 of those Target shirts.
Yep, you would be correct.
Of course.
Because that's
how
it
works. Why would you not go to Target?
Because I didn't think that Target was going to have that stuff at first.
No, I'm not saying you. I'm saying like just a generalization. Like, why would you not go to Target?
Well,
I think you just open the floodgates for a lot of people.
Which one is the bigger corporation here?
Target.
Exactly.
But H&M also has like their snooty hipster crowd.
I agree.
That would pay $3 for a shirt. Pay $3 more for a shirt made the same exact way.
But
as
I'm saying that from the perspective of us, which one is going to seem like the giant evil conglomerate? And even though they both are, I'm not disputing with you on that. They both are. Yeah,
one is George Soros does own Target, but we don't need to get all Alex Jonesy in here. I don't even know if you can say that name. You can say that name on YouTube.
You can say that name. Yeah.
We're not saying good things about him.
I watched Alex Jones on Joe Rogan, the funniest bits the other day, and he reminded me of someone, and I totally was drawing a blank on it. But someone,
Joe Rogan has him on YouTube.
But listen, people, this is as fun as I've had on the clothing hour, and I know as much as Chris is dreading actually talking about the movie, we are here to talk about the new Netflix original movie, Project Power. It is released by I can't remember these guys' names, so I'm gonna look it up real quick.
Well, someone like the Batman writer was involved in this, the upcoming Batman movie or something like that. Like,
yeah,
what have I been hearing about that?
Actually, yeah, you're right. I did
like
hear
him and Joseph Gordon-Levitt working together pre-Batman or something like that, right? Or no, Robert Pattinson's the Batman.
Robert Pattinson's the Batman.
This
Now
is
this
like
is
his
not
first big
not
outing.
Following the Nolan movies. The Nolan movies are done.
Yeah.
Gordon-Levitt is in this movie. So it's directed by Henry Joost and Ariel Schulman, who back in 2016 released a very small movie called Nerve. I didn't watch it, but everybody that I know who watched it really, really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
and actually got
watch it either.
really interesting out of it. From what I heard, it was kind of like it was like a Purge / Hunger Games mix, but like in the modern day with social media. And the thing that I like is that these guys, say what you will about the quality of their movies, is that these guys definitely seem to have their fingers on the pulse as far as like the modern day like zeitgeist goes. And I think that that really rings true, because the thing, if we could just jump in real quick before I kind of cover the plot, is that the thing that I can tell you right off the bat that I actually really enjoyed about this movie, first off, is that it seems to be the next installment in a couple of movies now that we've gotten in the last year and a half. I'd say everything post Avengers Endgame that has kind of been part of this little subgenre I've noticed called the anti-superheroes genre, where all of a sudden we're getting all of this material that kind of questions what it is that we love about superheroes. Because after a decade of being inundated with superhero and Marvel content, very similar content, you know, you've complained at nauseum about it. I'm even starting to feel the after effects of it, even though I do love a majority of those movies. I'll say that it almost feels like Hollywood, whether they actually want to say something or the more obvious reason because they just want to make a buck and because they noticed the Joker made $1 billion at the box office. I mean, Joker was an interesting case because that was really just Todd Phillips trying to get his latest what's it called? Trying to get his movie made, and he, like, you know, his mid-budget adult movie, which those movies aren't profitable in theaters anymore, but he slapped a massively popular superhero IP on it, and next thing you know, it made on the tiny budget that it was, it made $1 billion. But you had The Boys and Watchmen both last year. You've got The Boys season 2 coming out soon. There are a couple other things that came out that were like kind of in that vein. I know M. Night Shyamalan tried to do something like that last year with Glass. We all saw how that turned out, but
movie of last year, the number one film of last year, in the worst category,
number one worst, maybe, yeah. But only after Rise of Skywalker. But yeah, that's the thing that I did enjoy about this movie, is that these guys, say what you will about how this movie was executed, but these guys definitely, I think, added a new kind of way to examine kind of that anti-superhero struggle, where, you know, you had The Boys, which was dealing with the celebrity of it all, you know, and then you had Watchmen, which, again, very similar to the original comic, was tackling it from kind of the pop culture / historical perspective, which is what happened. I was
say the morality of it all.
Too. Well, the morality is always involved. That's a thing that's always involved, like, regardless. But the thing I liked about,
I think, like, the political morality, rather, with the Watchmen, I would say, is a big thing. But how divisive some of the episodes are and whatnot. Go check out our Watchmen reviews, multiple.
Yes, definitely. It's been covered a lot on this channel. But the thing that I liked about this is tackling it from the perspective of something that we've actually talked about a lot when it comes to the genre recently, which is kind of like the addiction aspect, where metaphorically this movie is literally saying, yo, we are addicted to superhero content because we all hate our lives and they're all miserable. And like drugs, we want to turn to something that will give us an escape. And for right now, superheroes seem to be occupying a lot of that. Another example that I just realized, The Umbrella Academy, which basically is on Netflix, which is basically like an inverse of the X-Men, which is basically where, like, yeah, what if the X-Men were actually like a bunch of like real kids that were like messed up by this one billionaire who just adopted them and basically turned them into superheroes without them really having a choice, and kind of examining the after effects of that and what happens, you know? So that's kind of like my take on what these guys were trying to go for. And from that perspective, I really enjoyed it. Now, how it was executed, that's a different story. And I will be the first person to admit that this is not a perfect movie, but I still got a lot of stuff to enjoy about it. But before I go on with it, Chris, what are your thoughts on Project Power so far? Like, going into it, what you had heard about it, if anything, and then what your thoughts on it. And don't mince words here either.
All I heard was the rumblings about a month ago when it had gotten announced, and you sent me the trailer. And it looked interesting, and I was actually really excited about it too. I remember sending you like a text back, and I was like, something like, can't wait. Like, this looks like it's going to offer something new, and it's going to keep along with like the whole Brightburns and the Boys of the world, which I've been more so enjoying than I have the major blockbuster chains like the MCU and the DCEUs and all that type of stuff of the world, which, sure, I've come to appreciate the MCU a little more than I have in the past, but I still double down actually now doing more research on the issues I have with it. And so I was like very much so looking forward to it. And I figured for actors like, Joseph Gordon-Levitt and Jamie Foxx to want to be on board with this, especially considering it's like a Netflix film, which I think that term is becoming a bit stigmatized. I couldn't agree more when I say that it had promise for me. It had hope, because why would these big actors choose to be on it, especially Joseph Gordon-Levitt coming out of his like little retirement? He nobly stepped aside to like raise his family and like do all that type of stuff for a little while, which is cool. And now he's like making his return. So I feel like he's really picking and choosing. So, and then with the trailers too, it seemed like there was a lot there. And I love the whole, sentiment of it. Like, we're addicted to superheroes, and the whole double meaning. And I think it's certainly a thinker on paper, which is why I think a bunch of big names were excited about it. A bunch of big names signed on for it, in the form of Jamie Foxx. Joseph Gordon-Levitt even had cameos from Casey Neistat, who's like one of the biggest YouTubers of all time.
I noticed that. I was like, I didn't recognize that guy, but they were giving that guy a lot of screen time. I'm like, who is that guy? And then somebody put in a Facebook
He was also
chat.
in Nerve. I think him and the director are friends.
I think so, yeah.
So I was excited by all means. You guys have heard me say nothing but good things about the Watchmen, the Boys, and I've been talking about like the more of this deconstructive superhero realm I consume, the more I just got to find a rainy day where I can watch Brightburn, because I feel like I'm gonna like that a lot. But for all the good this movie had going into it, I feel like it fell apart in the actual filmmaking process. I think the pre-production process is where the strength was, but I have so many issues with this film. Stretching from the performances to the cinematography, the shots just confusing the moment and just taking away from the moment. The framing, we'll get into it because I can't dissect it all at once, but I think if I was to read this script before seeing this movie, I would be like, holy, this is incredible. I cannot wait to see this made. And I just feel a little let down.
So you'd say your problem was very much within the actual filmmaking itself.
The filmmaking itself, yeah.
Okay. See, that's funny because that's not necessarily one of my problems that I have with it. Weirdly enough, but it's funny because most of the time, the way that this film was shot, I can't stand this type of filmmaking. Like that very frenetic, very hectic editing. It reminds me very much of the late 2000s when every action movie was shot like you strapped a GoPro to somebody's chest and then edited out every other frame so you couldn't tell what the hell was going on. But I think the thing that got me past it was the fact that, again, this premise was so insane. And I think that the biggest thing to me is that in just a year in general, coming off a couple of years now, obviously this year is a big exception given everything that's going on, but after a couple of years where it just seemed like just creativity and originality was just sapped from everything, even the lesser known stuff was starting to become derivative of things that we'd seen before, this finally felt like, I'm like, whoa, this is something completely new that I really haven't seen before. And I'm like, yeah, sure, we're getting kind of similar performances to one we've seen before. It just felt like this movie had the energy that I've been missing from so many previous movies. And then as it went on, I was like, oh, okay, now we're getting into generic territory. Because to me, it's so funny because I can't exactly pinpoint the moment when this started to get like really generic. But I just remember it started off awesome. The scene where Jamie Foxx and Machine Gun Kelly, like when Machine Gun Kelly lights himself on fire. Also, I love how he's gone back to Machine Gun Kelly now. I think that's hysterical. He was going for like the term, his real name, Colson Baker, for a while. And then after that, like when Jamie Foxx kidnaps Dominique Fishback and then they kind of start their quest, that to me is when it starts to like get slightly more generic and become like, I'm like, okay, I've seen this before, But so I guess talk about a little bit more about like some of the other things that kind of didn't like you talked about the filmmaking and how that translated, but like I guess what I'm trying to ask is, do you think that it's a matter of like, was it too generic for you? Like, was it a matter of it just didn't take full advantage of its premise? Because that was a big criticism that I heard about this, was that a lot of critics said that even though it had an insane premise, it didn't take full advantage of it. And I'm inclined to agree with that.
Yeah, the interesting part to me is the world. It's not what happens within the world, meaning the story, the 3-act structure that we get. You've seen that before. I mean, it's nothing new. It's very unfortunate that it's nothing new. And of course, the one fear that I had going into the beginning of it with that awesome, I thought that first sequence as well was pretty cool with MGK and Jamie Foxx. And
yeah, that was a great sequence.
Of course, that's like really the most you see of the power itself, the power being the drug in the film.
Yeah.
And it's like,
definitely.
Okay, so this, They
very much becomes a background gimmick as time goes on.
Yeah, they say, okay, well, you can have all these different types of powers, but we see 4. We see bulletproof. We see fire. We see Ice very briefly, and we don't even see the full extent of Ice.
Right.
We see it contained in a cage, and we see maybe one more. Someone turns big and gets like Hulk strength. So we see pretty much the
Rodrigo Santoro character, your guy.
Yeah, well, I mean, he let me down. He's let me down quite a bit this year. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, he has.
Go check out our Westworld review. But
yeah, right.
With that being said, you know, it's like, oh, cool. So you can have any power, and there wasn't a single creative original one. Because I could think of so many, like, even if they're silly little meaningless powers. I mean, look at The Boys. You know, The Boys had some unique powers you've never seen before. Like, why couldn't we have something like that? Like get a little creative, man. It just did. The world to play in, the sandbox had so much life, and then you get there and there's like one toy, and you're just like, oh, cool. I have a shovel and sand. Seen this before. Like
the one thing that I'll say as far as
to me, okay,
the one that I'll say
like bad advertising.
The one thing that I'll say as far as the effects go is that that's another thing that I'm just going to blame directly on Netflix. I'm not necessarily going to blame that on the filmmakers, because the one thing that I did like, at least just specifically from a visual standpoint, forget like the creative, from a visual standpoint, this to me was like more visually interesting and dynamic than like 90% of the stuff that I've seen from Netflix. Because Netflix, like we've talked about specifically on our Netflix episode, to me, after a while, especially since we're inundated with so much content on Netflix, it all starts to look the same. The sets all look similar. Even some of the lines that they say start to sound exactly the same. I'm like, I've heard that line in 5 other different Netflix things. I'm like, this visual, but the thing that I like is that these guys actually like wanted to add some color and some uniqueness to it. Like it definitely became more muted as time went on, and it definitely felt like by the time they got to the third act, they were running really low on their budget. They're like, okay, guys, come on, we got to wrap this up. But
where arguably it should have been, you know,
agreed.
Most
I'm sorry. When your first act shows all your cards, that's a problem. That's a big problem.
And that's what I'm saying. Like it certainly roped me in at first, and I hadn't seen Jamie Foxx in anything in a while, and especially Joseph Gordon-Levitt. You know, I hadn't watched an Amazon film of his yet, so I was excited. Honestly, I was.
Yeah, Joseph Gordon-Levitt finally making his comeback this year. He'll also be in Trial of Chicago 7 later this year.
Yeah, well, we'll be watching that one, and he wasn't bad, but it's just I don't think him or Jamie Foxx were given much to show their full talent.
I agree. But the one thing,
had I not seen any like of their past performances that are, you know, pretty good, like for example, Jamie Foxx and Ray, even though I don't speak about that movie that much as a musician, you know, I've seen it, and it's one of my favorite, if not favorite biopic. I mean, there's always a toss up between a big three. That's another podcast for a different day. So, I mean, I know what he's capable of. I don't think he even scratched the surface of what he's capable of in this movie. And it's very unfortunate because, again, I keep saying, like, I would have preferred seemingly any other direction to take in this film than the generic rescue and recover.
Right. And again, that's a story thing, right? But the thing that I'll say is that even with the story, and again, this might just be the fact that I am just so craving of just like great performances, because we really haven't gotten that many this year, just because again, this year it really has been slim pickings and we've had to take what we could get because of COVID. So I don't know if this is just me giving this movie like a little bit of a pass because of COVID, but I personally thought that Jamie Foxx and Joseph Gordon-Levitt were giving great performances. It's just been a while since I've seen those guys be awesome at something, because the last movie that I saw Joseph Gordon-Levitt in before he took a break from acting in order to look over after his kids was that Edward Snowden biopic, which he was good in, but he was very, very muted, you know. And it's been a while since I've seen, like, remember at the beginning of the decade, like that 2009 2010 period when Joseph Gordon-Levitt was like going to be like the next big thing, and then he made Don John in 2013, and that just kind of went away immediately. And Jamie Foxx, like I said, as recently as Baby Driver, he was the best part about Baby Driver. So I mean, I know that he's capable, and I really, really like these two. And I like the girl too, Dominique Fishback. She's relatively new. She was in that HBO show The Deuce with James Franco. And she was
that, but I enjoyed her a lot, actually.
Yeah, she was really good. She was arguably the best part about this movie. Like, she held her own.
She had life.
She had charisma.
She felt like a three-dimensional person, a real character.
Right. Yeah.
Jamie Foxx and Joseph Gordon-Levitt felt very one-note to me.
Yeah,
I think
they were typed, and it was definitely their performances that were carrying their very one-note character moments that we've seen before.
I mean, I think it's some of the writing, but I also think it's kind of, to me, bad direction is what this comes down to. For example, that ice scene, right? Where the Casey
that to me is where the problem started
girlfriend,
to
wife,
emerge.
Whatever she was, we never really know. She's like the example. They're like, hey, rich person who's probably going to buy a bunch of this power, trust me enough to give me your girl real quick, and we'll put her in this cage and have her take this thing. She's going to be okay. She turns into an ice queen, or whatever you want to call it, like that type of thing. And she like starts exploding. But what was probably an amazing action sequence was muddled by graphics on the screen of ice going all over inside this cage with muted sound, and just I don't understand. You could have shot that any other way.
Yeah,
and that was arguably one of the most
expensive
scenes, because you had like pretty much all of the big names in one scene in that movie, and it's like that there was a lot of CGI in that scene, and it's like, why? Like that
because
it's so confusing. It completely took me out of the moment. It felt like, hey, let's do something artistic for the sake of being artistic, but are we asking any of the questions that good directors ask?
Right.
How does this enhance the scene? How does this enrich the story? It seems like they didn't do that for majority of this movie.
You know what it felt like? It felt like that scene in the beginning of Guardians 2, where, you know, where Baby Groot is dancing around and you just see the background image of the big action shot, where again, it's like this, I'll tell you exactly what it is and why I have a problem with it, because you're absolutely right. The problem is that it's a scene that is pretending to be artistic when really it's just shot that way in order to save money. Because like all the action is what we should be following, but the action is only given to us in vignettes, and rather we're just following around the Ice Queen as she's like slowly being frozen and dying, because that's what we think the attention is going to be on. But like, we all have brains and we all have common sense, and we all kind of know that that's going to happen. And especially with the way it's shot, like that scene to me, which is followed by the Rodrigo Santoro hulking out scene, which is like the worst use of CGI I'd seen in that movie. That was like an Arish, that was like that Arish if you're like Comedy Central bit, which is like, oh god, like it just looks gross. I'm like, what am I back in the...
Before we get too far from this though, because I like actually that you brought up the Guardians 2 opening scene, but I disagree with you. I think that scene was pivotal.
That scene was actually creative.
Tone. That scene was, I think, for the tone of the movie, to let you know that, hey, things are going to get serious. There's a crazy action scene in the background, but this is still a Guardians film. Nothing has changed. Yeah, it's been a while, but we're still back in the setting that you guys loved so much the first time around. And so it at least to me had some intent, some thought. Hey, maybe the directors got lucky. Maybe they didn't think that. You never know. But I at least want to be able to critique it that way, because I love film so much, and I want to watch good film as much as I can, you know, and I want to, and as an aspiring, you know, we're both hopefully one day aspiring filmmakers. I can't not do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so when I ask these questions in this film, I fall short many times, like I did with this specific moment, of no reason behind it.
It's definitely one of those movies that is not trying to get you to ask the deep questions that it feels like it should. And again, that's a problem, because when you're a movie that's trying to posit this many actual questions and actually add something to the conversation, as far as like our obsession with superheroes, like why then do you just like it's almost like you're taking a backward step with every single step. And especially considering the fact that the thing that I liked is it almost felt like they were trying to be like creative and show off like kind of like all this technology, and then in order to like distract you from the story. And I guess I should have realized that early on. Like, to me, I feel like the minute that we started seeing the flashbacks with Jamie Foxx with the daughter, I was starting to be like, oh no, that's where this is going. And yeah, it really took away, especially considering the fact that, again, so much to me the focus should be on the pills, and like the fact that like you don't know, like at any minute somebody's going to take these pills and they're going to like, you know, turn crazy or whatever, you know. And I felt like the last act should have been like almost like a raid sequence where it's like the three of them and they just have to make their way up through this building, you know, like helping each other out, like, you know, original superhero team wise. I'm not saying that like that would have been better than necessarily what we got, but I certainly know it would have been more inventive and more entertaining, you know. And the other thing too that I think was a huge missed opportunity that I don't think they took advantage of enough is the fact of they specifically state that when you take these pills, besides the fact that you only get the powers for 5 minutes, which I thought was interesting, but they didn't do enough with. I thought that what's it called? You know, the fact that people didn't know what powers they were going to get, I thought that was interesting. And that, I don't think they tapped into that enough, because the whole thing is that, like, I felt like there should have been a thing where it's like whatever power you get should be, like, associated with whatever your personality is, you know? And they really didn't do that at all. Just like, oh, you take a pill. Oh, you get fire powers. Oh, you get ice powers. Oh, you grow horns from your chest. Oh, you Hulk out, you know, all that stuff. And then the other big thing too that I had a problem with, that I don't think they took advantage of, is, again, like there was one time I think where I saw this happen one time, which is where they took the pill and then they just blew up, because the whole thing is the pills are unpredictable and you don't know what you're going to get. And a very unfortunate side effect was that you would blow up as a result.
Yeah, but it's okay that we only saw it once, because they spoke about it 90 times.
Right. And again,
which, if you didn't pick up on my sarcasm,
not show, you're making my point for me. So
yeah, if you didn't pick up on my sarcasm,
also
there,
in between
you guys
but Yeah, no, we got it. Yeah, definitely. So again, I think it's safe to say that I still like this movie a lot more than you did. But again, I do have problems with it. It's not a perfect movie. Again, I'll attribute this solely to the fact that I am very deprived of content and I'm not inundated. So it's kind of the opposite of the last couple of years. Last couple of years,
because I'm actually really surprised that
I'm not.
Like, what good do you have to say about this film then?
Again, because to me, it comes from the originality of the premise. And the problem is that, and I cannot believe that I'm saying this, but the problem is that I understand the need to critique and I understand the need to like say when something is problematic and fix it and when we don't like something. But at the same time, I do say that original ideas and premises like this one are so few and far between that when they do happen, we do have to give them credit where credit is due. Because because literally, again, I've talked about this with you before, which is how many times does Hollywood use a poorly made but an interesting idea that has promise, albeit being poorly made and it just needs to be perfected, as an excuse to be like, oh, okay, people don't like original ideas, let's just give them the next sequel, and then we get inundated with another like 5+ years of more than mediocre, even more mediocre than I would say than this, or sorry, better quality than this, but more mediocre, still the same mediocre storytelling that we see as far as just more sequels and remakes go, And I understand also that not everything is obviously going to be on the level of The Boys or Watchmen, but those are two very specific examples made by people who are very, very creative and have been doing this for a while. And also, let's be honest, have a lot more money behind them than Netflix, because The Boys is Amazon, which, say what you will about that show, is still another very low budget show, but it knows how to use its budget and not look cheap like everything Netflix does. And Watchmen is HBO, which has like money, like Game of Thrones money. So again, those are the two things that I have to take into consideration. Yes, I agree with you on absolutely everything about the more than generic plot points, about the more than generic character types, on the fact that they did not take full advantage of the premise. I am with you on that. But as far as, again, besides the fact that we are not inundated with as much content, we got to give original ideas like this the props that they do deserve, because if not, then we're just contributing to more of the things that we hate about how movies are made now.
I feel like I did that, though. I feel like I was saying that, and on paper, it's an amazing world. It's an amazing sandbox. I just think,
and I'll agree, it was not the best directed
CW execution that we got, being the visuals, the very one-note characters, the one-beat performances. It doesn't echo what I would expect from the CW, being that those are very one-dimensional scripts. They're very much so in the style of old TV, that Smallville-esque writing style where we have to go 22 seasons, so all the big things are going to be stretched out, and we're not going to have as many moments that are memorable because we have 22 episodes ordered by a studio in 2020.
Right.
So that's where I can't forgive it when it doesn't pay off, when it pays off in the same way as something that we understand why it is what it is, and we watch it because we know what we're getting into. This, we had a clean slate, and I'm just so, man, I'm all about the deconstruct with superhero realm.
Oh, I know. I am too.
I live for it. I was excited
for the superhero genre.
And I just to have like I'm with you when I say that they had a gold mine they tapped into in the premise, and just to like execute it this way, it just seems so criminal to like what I think. And no one's seen the script outside of the in circles or whatever, but to what I think on paper reads really well. I would have to assume. I don't know. It's just, I just can't get past it, man, because like, for example, that sequence at the end where, Joseph Gordon-Levitt's sort of running through the ship, and you have all these tight action moments. We didn't really see those action moments though. Like the editing, the camera shots were like, oh, someone's in the hallway, duck behind you. Crazy cuts, very confusing, stills dropping in and out, then he's standing over them. And I think the budget just restricted a lot in that third act, like you were saying, much of what could have recovered a very generic, like, second act of like, oh, we're establishing the team. Now the stakes are here. We have to go and retrieve this. We got to stop them from selling this thing, or the New World Order is going to take over. You kind of knew it was going there, and that would have been fine had we gotten the spectacle that it deserved at the end, and we just didn't. I don't know.
You know what's funny about that ending is that ending. Well, it felt like it was very much building up to have sequels, and that like they were going to be able to set that up where it's like, oh, Jamie Foxx's daughter wasn't there and they had to fight their way out. Now the three of them have to team up in order to go and find her and fight against and take down this evil corporation. And at the end, it was almost kind of like nah. It was almost like Jamie Foxx was like, nah, I only signed on for one contract, and he was not down for sequels. And so they resolved his plots, but then they could potentially keep going with the Joseph Gordon-Levitt thing. But again, the problem too is that even though I love Joseph Gordon-Levitt in this movie, his whole arc felt like a complete afterthought as far as things go, because Fishback is working with him at first, obviously, and then obviously she gets kidnapped by Jamie Foxx, and then that whole arc takes over. And then the whole thing, what happens is that all the Joseph Gordon-Levitt stuff is just like explained off screen. And it's like, oh, okay, so we're just supposed to forget about that whole arc.
Right. And we don't even...
It was very clearly setting up towards sequels.
Maybe. It could have been. I kind of felt like it was until Jamie Foxx said that one line.
Yeah.
But I do got to say, like, that whole relationship with him and the police commissioner, which is generic, and we've seen it before. Generic. But why even tap into it if it's just going to be a one-scene thing? Like, we didn't need that. So you're right. Joseph Gordon-Levitt, he was just an afterthought. And, like, dude, we get it. You're in New Orleans. Like, you don't got to have everything Saints on your car. Like, there's other things that define that city. It was just, like, so trying to be in the setting. Do you know what I mean? It just all felt so forced once it got off the page, man.
Which, again, is funny because the whole thing is that I'm like, wow, if this is supposed to take place in New Orleans, why in the hell does nobody have a New Orleans accent? Because New Orleans, like that, they have a very distinctive accent there, you know?
Right. And you know what? Can I tell you? The only person who I heard speak about that other than you, which is David of Flicks Talk, he said that, like, Joseph Gordon-Levitt was kind of doing it in his review, but then every time he yelled, it was just gone.
Yeah.
So it's like, don't even try, man.
I think it went away. I think it was one of those things where he started off trying to do an accent, and then it just went away as time went on.
It did. Yeah, in the third act, it was completely gone.
Yeah.
It was completely gone.
Yeah.
I don't know, man. Like, I just don't have too much good to say about this film, but you really didn't get into what you liked about it too much.
Right. Well, again, the problem is that, like I said, it's the originality of it and the fact that I wanted... It's so tricky because the problem is I literally just brought up like all the stuff that I don't like about it. I'm starting to pull like a Corey from the Spill days where I'm like, oh crap, did I actually like this movie? But again, the whole thing is that, like I said, it's one of those, and I cannot believe that I'm actually applying this argument here, and you're going to want to strangle me for this, is that it was very much a turn off my brain and enjoy it movie. And I hate to use that argument, especially given who I am. But again, just because we've been inundated, or rather lack thereof, so little content as far as that goes, you know, and the last couple movies that I watched, you know, like King of Staten Island, which was very, very heavy and very personal, especially towards like a little bit of what I've gone through in the past, and Defy Bloods, which was very heavy and very political, as friggin', you know, every Spike Lee movie is. And there were a couple other ones, you know, and the problem is that the movies have been so few and far between, especially like just last weekend with The Tax Collector and American Pickle, two movies that were just bottom of the barrel.
You gotta forget those.
Crap. Yeah, exactly. And that's the problem, is that, like, again, I can't believe I'm saying this, but only because we really haven't been in this situation before, where we are just so slim pickings. Like, movies are closed. The problem is, again, it's part of our privilege. We are so used to being inundated with content from so much, like going to the theaters every weekend, watching stuff every single day, you know, because there's always new stuff, that now it's like, now that we're kind of like, we have a reality check and we don't have as much stuff to watch, it's like, you know, got to take what you can get. And for the most part, I enjoyed watching it. It was one of the very rare circumstances that I haven't had in a while, which is where, even though I knew what the problems were, and the problems definitely started to emerge more and more as time went on, I still very much enjoyed it. And I was having a fun blast with it. I thought the performances were good. I thought that they were all very charismatic. I was having fun with it. This was the first movie in a while where some of the one-liners, I was actually quoting back to the movie, which is something I don't think I've done with a single movie this whole year, with the exception of King of Staten Island. I think that was the only other movie where I did that this year. And that, like, that shows something, you know. Again, it's interesting. I was watching a video essay on, again, something that we talked about a couple weeks ago with the Michael Bay Transformers movies, which I've already gone into nauseam about those, which is the idea that, again, we're human beings at the end of the day. And even though, yes, we are critics and analysts first and foremost, at the end of the day, we're human beings, and we're subject to you know, emotional responses to things. And again, part of the reason to me why I love the Transformers movies is that, even though, yes, they are incomprehensible, yes, they are ridiculous, yes, they are blatantly offensive, yes, the stories suck and are just repetitive, you have to admire the filmmaking, because at the end of the day, there is nothing quite like this. And even though I would not at all apply that argument to this movie, what I'm saying is that, as far as the emotional responses and just the enjoyment and the excitement that I got from watching this movie, you know, that to me is what carried it through, you know. And it's just like, at the very least, I was seeing something creative here, you know, which is something that, again, it makes it the idea that, like, even the great stuff that we watch especially for us, we kind of already have an idea that we're going to enjoy it. Like, let's face it, King of Staten Island, the minute that we saw Judd Apatow's name attached to it, we knew we were going to enjoy it to some aspect, you know? Same thing to me, at least to some extent, with Defy Blood. Spike Lee's a lot more of a problematic filmmaker, but we kind of knew exactly what we were going to get. Like, even though I really enjoyed Defy Bloods, there were points in that movie where I'm like, yep, seen that in this movie. Yep, seen that in this movie. Yep, knew that was going to happen. Yep, knew Spike was going to do that. And literally to the point where when that movie tried to be unpredictable, it kind of almost ended up deterring from the quality, you know? And same with a lot of other things, you know? It just, the problem is that just because we've been inundated with kind of the pop culture machine, you know, especially given the internet and social media, it just makes everything so much less, it's so much more predictable and so much less enjoyable. Like, I was having a conversation with my professor the other day where I just dared to say that, you know, oh, I've seen this structure before. And he's like, oh, don't try to judge the structure of a movie based on the trailer alone. And I'm like, well, how about you tell trailer companies to stop making every single goddamn trailer the exact same? You know, how about you do that? Then I'll stop doing it. You know, again, it's the thing that we've been critiquing Hollywood on for since we started this, which is that again, they seem to run out of ideas. And that rings true. And again, it really does kill me when, even at the end of the year, when I make my top 10 lists, I can pretty much predict what my 10 favorite movies of the year are going to be. And there's only a few surprises. Like, I can say for a fact that last year, out of my top 10 list from 2019, there were only 2 surprises for me. And that was Klaus and Climax. Everything else that was on that list, I kind of knew was going to be on there, you know? And to me, that's a problem. That is a big problem when we can't be surprised by movies anymore. And so for this movie to surprise me as much as it did, even with all the problems involved, that to me is what got me through it, if that makes any sense at all.
It does. And I don't want to make it seem like I'm being like a negative Nancy. I've actually had like a great start to my morning. Went outside, played with my puppy, took a swim. So I'm in good spirits today. We're recording a little earlier than usual, but I just don't want to settle. I don't want to. I'm
agree.
Not saying
and
you are, but because I had the same thought when I saw, Jamie Foxx and Joseph Gordon-Levitt in a film. I'm probably going to like this. But I feel like I was, and I'm not saying you weren't. I'm just saying I feel like I was able to be objective enough to realize, well, you can have, I don't know, J.J. Abrams on this thing, right? Someone who I have a huge bias for. It's going to be a bad movie if it's a bad movie. Look at the most recent Star Wars film.
Yeah.
You know?
I agree.
I think now you're seeing more so than ever that we're kind of getting these straight to VOD projects, in a sense, films that the studios knew were going to flop. So that's really what a lot of 2019 has been, that they were going to sprinkle in between.
2020 in this case.
Yeah. Sorry. I think I'm longing for better times, which is where I was going with this. It's like back in 2019, these kind of films were able to coast under the radar because you would get hit with the Joker, you would get hit with the Once Upon a Time in Hollywood to cover up like the not so good films, or the films that like maybe weren't the best or didn't like strike gold as much as they should have. Like Richard Jewell comes to mind for just like, I won't fall victim to the, we're finally getting something new, and so I have to be a little nicer to this. I won't. All right. This was very thinly veiled and it just didn't make sense. Like it just like the filmmaking didn't make sense. It didn't translate. It didn't enhance the story at all. The choices from the creators felt poor. The acting was poor at best. When your youngest actor who has the least amount of experience is bringing the most life to a role, especially when she's in a film with Jamie Foxx and Joseph Gordon-Levitt, 2 titans at this point, I would say. It's unacceptable to me. It's really unacceptable when I felt like I could have seen this as an introduction to a new DC show. If they did one of their classic 4-part crossovers, I could have imagined Arrow jumping down on that cargo hanger at the top the same way that dude who popped the bones out of his body did. No. I will not stand for that. I won't fall victim to that trap. And I'm not saying you are. I'm just saying this is why I feel the way I do about this film. Especially because I was excited about it going into it.
I was about to say, you mean
that's the kicker.
The Spike motherfucker, that guy. Like,
that's the kicker.
Yeah, it's funny because like when I saw that power, I'm like, did they just pull a Spike from X-Men? I mean, I guess cool because I haven't seen that. I haven't seen that ever, but it's kind of a lame power, to be honest.
You know, and that's kind of like all I really have to say about this thing. I'm not saying we have to end it, but I'm just saying, like, for me to just keep beating a dead horse here, I'm just gonna keep quadrupling down on my stance, because I won't just be nice to something because it's the only thing we have.
Right. And I'm not saying that I'm being nice. That's the thing. I'm saying that.
And I think I've made a good point of saying that these are all my thoughts, and I know you're not saying that. I'm just sort of rebuttaling you, because I think like when art has been its best is when it was in reaction to some of like the most trying cultural times.
Right. I agree.
So I think people need to step up, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
Because we need good content. We need to not settle right now. We need something to take our mind off this madness.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I don't know. I just wonder when or if we're going to get that good content, because to me, all that I know is that it's either a matter of people haven't been reactive as they should be, or just the problem is that all the people that we hear are the vocal minorities. And the problem is that the majority of people who are still watching this stuff, they just don't care. You know, we've talked about it. They just want to be mindlessly entertained. It's funny. Did you watch the Tim Dillon on Joe Rogan thing the other day? And he was talking about how people,
I've seen a few clips of it.
It's funny. He brought up a really interesting point, which is that like the whole idea of rights is that like people don't actually care about their rights. And the way that he phrased it, I'm like, I'm not entirely disagreeing with him at all. You know, like there's a reason why I made my senior thesis. I
haven't seen that clip. So I can't really speak to it.
There's a reason why and I can't believe I'm saying this because again, this seems to undercut the entire idea of our podcast. But to me, there's a reason why. To me, I think the idea of critics don't matter if they ever did, you know, but that's a whole podcast for another day. Look, the point being is that Project Power, while certainly a very problematic installment, I think it does add something to the deconstructive superhero thing. And even though, yes, it is very poorly made and it has problems up the wazoo, I think that the originality of it is something to be commended. And I hope, at least for the best for the future, since it looks like this movie is not going anywhere, is that somebody could take something like this, or at the very least be inspired by something like this as being original and do something more with it and actually come up with something creative and inventive going forward with it.
I mean, man, if this is what we're getting, sign me out, you know?
Yeah.
Like I just can't keep getting excited for bad movies. It's 2020.
I felt 3 years ago.
2020.
Yeah.
Jesus. I don't know, man.
Worst year for movies yet.
In conclusion, I will say that I've never been more let down in 2020 from a film because hasn't been many films I actually was excited for. So I was not really excited, but I was like, okay, cool. Seems like something good is finally coming down the pipeline. The whole tenets on, tenets off, tenets on, tenets off, that became a bit defeating.
Yeah.
Snyder Cut news was just news to talk about because there was lack of something else. I saw it was happening, but then I saw this as some hope. And it was far from that.
Wow.
It was very far from that.
Now, don't sound too defeatist there.
Dude, like I said, I had a great day. I played with my puppy. I took a morning swim. This has been a great morning. But I got to be honest, you
had to record this podcast and you're like, oh, crap.
I'm just being honest. I can't be one of those guys who just blindly supports this just because it has some big names in it and it's the first of something in a while. I can't.
All right.
So, closing thoughts? Get out of here.
I mean, I already gave my closing thoughts pretty much, but yeah, like I said. Star ratings?
Star ratings, 1 out of 10.
Wow. I'll give this 3 out of 5.
Yeah, 1 out of 5. Sorry, but you knew what I meant.
I know what you meant. Yeah, it's not the worst thing that I've seen so far this year. Not by a long shot. Tax Collector and American Pickle were much worse to me. Old Guard to me was much more of an example of having an interesting premise that it just wasted on generic stuff. Oh yeah,
hey,
how could we forget the gems that are at Fantasy Island and Capone? Oh my god.
That's what I mean by it's been that kind of year.
Yeah, it really.
But you know what? It's been a great year for our YouTube channel.
Yes, it has.
Something I'm very thankful for. Like, it just is my driving force right now. So even though this wasn't the best review, I'm just like, I'm still glad we got to do this today. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
I'm just being honest, and I know it's a bit of a different Chris, but I just want people to maybe sort of wake up a bit and smell the roses.
Oh, see, I thought you were going to go for your smell the coffee metaphor that you love using.
No, I mean, I smelled the coffee this morning. That's why I'm so full of life and energy, and I think I'm able to be so clear and transparent about my thoughts on this movie.
Yeah.
But so Dom, speaking of our YouTube channel, we have a lot going on over there. A lot to be thankful for. And so you want to take something here? You want to?
Yeah, we do. Our community top 10 list is almost up to 200 views. Let's see if we can keep it going there, people. Like,
who would have thought?
Seriously, how? How does this keep happening? Yeah, we got a lot of interesting stuff coming up. We got, in case you guys didn't know, Lovecraft Country on HBO debuted last night, and we've got something interesting coming down the pipeline for there. We've also got a
also, speaking of Lovecraft Country, I'm going to be starting this Friday putting out my first episode by episode review, and I'm going to try and follow it through. So,
all right, awesome.
Even if that's just like some extra bonus content, we maybe put out like 1 or 2 things a day now. I feel like I got to do it, man, because I've been a Lovecraft guy for a while. And
I missed the episode last night, but I'm gonna watch it after we're off this podcast. We've also got the live Q&A that we're doing this coming Friday night. If you guys are there, tune in for this one. Next week, for all you Avatar fans, I've also just recently put up my top 10 favorite Avatar: The Last Airbender episodes. Also coming out next week, we'll have our top 10 favorite Avatar: The Legend of Korra episode podcast. Not the top 10, our Legend of Korra
with a special
podcast.
Guest host.
Yes, Andrew, you say his last name. I'm never gonna get it right.
How do you think it's said?
I'd say Gyomai, but I know that's not how you say it. It's Jamai.
I like that. I think that's funny. Jamai, right. Andrew Jamai, my co-host on Talking with Andrew and Chris, which is a show about life, music, and everything in between. We do episodes every Monday. It's about music for the most part, but we get silly and we talk about video games and everything. Andrew's a silly guy. You'll see on that episode that he's co-hosting with Dom about next Wednesday. You'll get Andrew's vibe.
And also, if you haven't checked it out already, check out the first piece of bonus content that Chris has finally put out. Our first episode of No NPCs Allowed, featuring David of Flix Talk. It's still up on the channel. It's uploaded today on Monday, the day that we're recording. But for when this is released, Wednesday, go check it out if you haven't already. Chris and David had a pretty interesting conversation about video games. I picked up about 5% of what they were saying because I don't play video games, but
you listened to it.
I did listen to it. I really enjoyed it.
So it honestly, like, you don't have to be nice to me right now. It honestly was interesting for a non-gamer.
It was, definitely. I think you could still use a little bit of work as far as your intro goes, but as far as the stuff, you guys knew your stuff.
Cool.
Like I knew you would.
That's the goal. The goal is just to, because there is a cinematic component to video games, and I think to not notice that is just to be stuck in a bubble. Absolutely. Which is something. If you taken anything away from today's episode, is don't be stuck in a bubble. Be a free thinker. Be able to critically and analyze anything and everything artistic, because I think that's how we get better art. So I'm glad you guys checked that out. We have no set schedule for that show. It's kind of just like, hey, we're going to be putting them out from time to time because I play games, and games take a little bit more time to get through than movies or TV shows.
Yes, they do.
So, but we just, that's the whole point with our channel, is to just, we're not one-dimensional people, right? Like, we have other interests, we have other things that we enjoy artistically, and we want to start to share them with you.
The one thing I will say, though, you better cover Last of Us. I'm just saying right now, you better cover Last of Us, because when that show comes out, I'm not playing the game, but I will definitely watch the show when it comes out on HBO.
Yes. That's what we're saving it for. I can tell you right now, we're going to be doing a look back at the Tony Hawk Pro Skater game next month when the remake comes out of the classic first PlayStation 1 2001 Tony Hawk Pro Skater game. So we have a lot of stuff coming with that one. It's going to take some time for the playlist on YouTube to build up, but I think it's going to be worth it, because I think there was a bar set pretty high in that first episode, and a lot of that's David, but David knew way more than I thought he was going to know. So we got a bar to establish and a bar to set, and I hope you guys enjoy it. I really do, because like I said, we are going to try so many different things with this channel. You don't even know what's coming. We're not going to spoil it right now, but they don't even know.
Absolutely not. No, they don't.
This is just the start of the new stuff. Honestly.
Oh, yes. Yeah. 4 months left of the year. And like we said, people, 12 seasons. 12 seasons and something else.
And a short film.
Okay. Well, I mean, the short film will
12
seasons in a short film. Okay, way to
be our thing, dude.
Way to completely rip off Community and just like do our own thing. But
if there was ever a mantra to establish for us, I think that's a really funny one. Talkin TV, 12 seasons in a short film. Oh man,
that's not derivative at all. But anyways, people, follow us on Instagram, follow us on Facebook at Talkin TV or at Talkin TV Podcast for all the notifications that we have coming out. And as always, people, watch more fucking movies, or in this case, TV, or in this case, play more fucking video games. There's a lot of content out there. Just do all of it, because there's nothing else to do right now.